As I said previously, please introduce yourself in the chat. You can start with your name, your company name, and your trade. Also, your contact information is good too. All right, let's get into it. So the agenda for today is that we're going to review the participation requirements. Then we're going to have speakers and introductions. Then we'll have course topics and presenters, and finally conclude with a survey. To review the participation requirements, if you have a question, please use the raise your hand feature to be acknowledged or ask your question. You can also put your questions in the chat if that's more convenient. Please have your cameras on during the session. We want this to be as engaging and as interactive as possible. So if you're able to, please keep your cameras on. Please put your microphone on mute unless you're speaking, but please try to have your cameras on so we can all have it be a classroom setting. Lastly, participate. Please be an active participant. If you're able to, please change your name to your name and company name. But we want this to be engaging. We're here as a resource to you. So any questions that you have, please make sure that you're asking. Okay, that is it for me. Our speaker today, Robert, is going to introduce himself and I'll let him take it away.
Just a second. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert Lowry, Field Support Project Executive with Meriwether & Williams. I'm excited to be able to present this topic on change order management because we all know that this is very important for projects to make sure that you're successful. So some of the items that we're going to be going through is some of the guidelines, some recommendations. I'll have some handouts that I'll go through and walk you through. So you'll be able to get my presentation at the end of this workshop and also the two handouts that I'll be going through. Like Rena said, very interactive. I want you guys to ask questions. I'm gonna ask you questions, so be prepared. I want to be able to that you are, come out of here with one or two things that you didn't know at the end of this workshop. So any questions so far?
No, thank you.
All right, ready. All right. So we're gonna, as you guys know, I love to be in person versus virtual, so bear with me here for a little bit here as I get adjusted. So the agenda we're gonna go through, the little bit of the background about change order management, why it's important. Then we're gonna walk through change order requests, how to identify the information that's in the contract. What do you need to do steps by steps, how to reconcile. That's part of the change order management is to reconcile because as this is financial of the project. You want to make sure that you're being treated fairly. So those are the three areas we're going to go through today. Change orders is work that's not included in your original scope contract that you sign. So, change orders can be added or deducted. So you have to be aware of what type of change order that they're going to be. And then you want to be able to properly handle these starts and realistics, about the scope of in your contract, the effective date of change order, minimize the risk of cost increases and schedule disruptions. So those are kind of the things what cost change order management is about. So we'll go a little bit more into it. And I know the example I might show you will not be able to see as well, but it kind of shows you, what we're talking about. So if you can't see it, I'll try to read some of this here. So change order. So, within your contract, so when you're bidding jobs, you should also get a copy of the contract so you can see what the owner requirements are or your hiring contractors requirements are. So as we're talking about change order, so this is like as a subcontractor, you agree to furnish materials, perform, that in this case is the prime, in writing. And again, it goes through, it's like, okay, what is your markup that they're going to allow you on a change order? and this is going to be 15%. And the way that sometimes can break down either further within the 15%, if you're a general contractor, and you're performing the work, then you get all of that 15%. But if you have subcontractors, it's going to be, they might get 10% and you get 5% as a general contractor because you're administering the paperwork and issuing the change to your subcontractors in the billing. So that's why you only get a percentage of these change orders when it's spelled out in the contract like that. So they also go through, what is supposed to be fixed in writing, even though they say, hey, I want you to make this change, I want you to make this change, but you want to make sure that you get it in writing, just like it says within the contract. Because as you know, as you're a trade on a bigger project, the superintendent is like, hey, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. Yeah, it's fine and dandy, but he is not the final decision. It's whoever signs your contract or the PM. So you want to make sure that you can go back and go through what exactly is required. Just because the superintendent is telling you to do things, he might not be adherent to your subcontract agreement. So that's why you want to be able to read through this and fully understand. When you go to the kickoff meeting, if there's something that's in here that you don't quite understand, ask the questions. You want to get clarifications of what exactly that you're supposed to do. Because this section I've seen in some contracts is very vague. You want to make sure that you want to get it, very precise. Like for this here, it says the subcontract shall give HEI a written notice within at least 3 calendar days prior to performing any additional work. So they're telling you got 3 days to let them know that you're going to be doing, additional work. But however, it could be this contract could be driven by the time, the end date. You don't have time to sit here and wait to put a change order request together, then submit. So it could be just send a notification over, they respond back with the email, said, yes, please go forward with it. Some kind of way you want to be able to track the request from beginning to end. And there's just some more language about the change order process. Now, with this, as sometimes in these contracts, you'll see that this could say no change orders, no alteration, no modifications. It's like, but if the owner or the design team comes back and make a change, then therefore you're entitled to a change order because they're making a modification to design into your scope. So that's one thing you have to be aware of. Also, one thing that falls within these change orders is, deductive change orders, back charge. So if you're out there working and you get a warning and say, hey, you're not doing this correct, or you have damaged someone else's work, then they're going to put it in writing and say, hey, you've got X amount of days to fix this. If not, they're going to back charge you. So with back charges, you have to make sure they have to give you a notice in writing in advance, so you're aware of these back charges. If you see a back charge at the end of the project, then say, hey, where's the documentation that you notified me of the back charge? Then you can challenge that, but just be aware of these back charges. And it can come down with cleaning. If you're not keeping, the site clean, with your work, they might give you one, hey, where's your composite clean and clean up better? And then they're gonna give you a second one, and they say, okay, we're gonna give you a back charge. And so what that back charge is going to be the cost of someone else coming in to correct the deficit that you have created. And then they're going to deduct that from your contract value. Any questions so far? Okay, so we're going to kind of go into some definitions here that are kind of used throughout the industry. So some of the definitions, PCI, it can be is a potential change or potential cost impact. So whenever you hear the word PCI, that's what it stands for, potential change or potential cost impact. And that is where you're going to identify that change in cost as a ROM, because you're going to identify it right away. So you're going to create your PCI. This is kind of for your internal tracking, unforeseen condition, and you're going to give it a ROM, rough order of magnitude of, say, okay, this could be $4,000, not to exceed $4,000. You're going to then submit that as a potential cost impact to the GC or to the owner, so they are aware, hey, this is coming up, to give you time to put it together and for them to react or respond. This also could be you do a RFI, request for information, and you send it over and it comes back saying, oh, I want you to do X instead of Z, but that's not in your scope. So then you're going to be able to create a cost impact in your own numbering system, give them a ROM so you can get the final numbers put together. So there's a lot of communication that needs to go when you're starting to identify potential cost impacts. The types is change to owner. Now that means the owner will absorb the costs from the GC to the trade partners all the way down. The owner has accepted that cost. It could be a firm number or it could be time and material. They could say, give me a number not to exceed. So when they do a not to exceed time and material, you're going to have to track that on daily tickets. Any material that you had, the guys that you have out there, and how many hours they work, all that needs to be tracked on a daily basis for that change order. And you want to make sure that you're getting the superintendent or whoever it is to sign off on this. So you don't want to leave that site that day without a signature, because you want to be able to say, hey, are these numbers right? Do you agree to it? That's the important part with time and materials. It's tracking on the daily, get it approved daily. And as you're getting close to that X, say
Go to
$44,000.
the ED. Go to ED.
Okay. So when you get close to that and you still haven't finished, you say, hey, you know what? I'm about 80% finished and we're at $3,500. Then you can go back and do another T&M to add on so they know that the work isn't being done. So T&M it can be a good thing, but it's management of that takes a little extra. Now, if it says no change to the owner is not going to absorb that cost at all. So it could be between you and the hiring agent, like a general contractor, where they're going to absorb that and not pass it on to the owner. There could be things where they could come back to you and say, hey, can you do this for me? It's like, sure, but it's going to be a change to you. And you're going to ask, is it going to go to the owner or is it you're going to keep it within yourself? So you want to be able to identify the type of change orders that is going to be. The same thing applies to this. They want a firm number or time and material for no change to owner. And the other type is back charge. We kind of went through that earlier. Any questions so far? And all these that I'm talking kind of builds into how you're going to manage the change order logs and your change order requests. Okay, then after that, you're going to go into the status of these individual PCIs or change orders, which is interchangeable here. It's going to be submitted and you're proceeding, but you have not, been approved yet because it's time, you need to get moving. You submit it and you have not proceeded, and those are good ones there because you want to make sure that it's going to get approved before you proceed. And then not submit it and you're proceeding, that's a risk that you're taking on, 100% risk on you because you have not submitted any paperwork, but you're proceeding on this change order. And this is one that gets people in trouble in the field because you haven't submitted anything, you're proceeding because you want to continue to do work with this general contractor. That's great, but you got to protect your company. You're doing business. Just because they're going to pressure you, get it done. It's like, yeah, I'll agree, but I'm part of this team and I need to protect my business as well. Then the others is you have not submitted and you have not proceeded. So that is like, hey, that's kind of like a notification there. Then the other one is pending and not proceeding. Then the last two is got approved or denied. With the approved, there could be a approved under protest. Now, when you see that comes back on your change order request approved under protest, so there's something in there that the owner or the GC is not comfortable with, but is on the time trying to get it done. So there could be come back to you after it's approved and say, hey, can we reconcile this change order? I really don't agree with your costs here. They might have a cost manager that's reviewing all these change orders that you're submitting, and they'll look and say, we think it takes 10 man hours to do this, and you're saying 15, 20 man hours. They don't disagree, so you're going to have to justify it and come back with, okay, this is really was with my tickets to show it. Or they might say, hey, this is all we're going to give you. We can't give you, 20 hours and when it should have been 10 hours to do this. So you have to be that. Then they also will look at the cost of, what is your hourly rate? If at the end of the job and you've got quite a few approved under protest, they might come back and say, hey, can we go through some of these change orders? I've had that happen on jobs where I had to go through a lot of change orders at the end of the job, even though it was approved, because then we had to negotiate pennies on the dollar because they were over budget, couldn't go back to the owner for other, for additional money. And as we all know that when you do these change orders, some of these numbers are padded. So, you're like, okay, I can give up a little bit, but you want to make sure you're still making your profit. And then the other one is denied. It's like when it's denied, it's like, what do we do there? That's a conversation that you need to have with, the general contractor. It's like, hey, this change order was denied. Why? It could be lack of, supporting documents or, something that could have generated that denied. So have the conversation with them. Don't just say, okay, it's denied and don't do it because it had to be generated for some reason. Or, it's like, that's a nice to have. Let's not do it. And it was denied. So, that's why you want to get the reason why. Any questions so far?
Patricia, you had your, I think you reacted to something. Did you have a question? Okay. If you do have a question, you can use the raise your hand feature or put it in the chat.
Yeah, I can always go back to anything that I've talked about. Okay, so some more definitions that we kind of be going through is OCO, owner change order. And this is kind of like a packaging of, your change order requests. The owners, because it could be many change orders that's on this project, and they could say, okay, GC, I need for you to package X amount of change orders into one owner change order number. And also the change order request number, is going to be submitted. And, you can bundle change orders into a single OCO. So like I was saying, so it could be OCO 001. And then within that package, you could have change order 2, 3, 4, 19, however they want to package it. So that, you want to make sure that you're asking up front, how do you want these change orders? Do you want them one-to-one, or do you want to put them in a bundle and then submit? For me, I like to do one for one because that way you can single out that one. If there's an issue, you can work through it. But if you put it in a bundle, they say, oh yeah, we're still going through all the change orders. And then, you're like 2 weeks into it and all of a sudden this whole package come back, OCO number one comes back to you, but you could have probably addressed that one particular change order in advance. So that's kind of how your preference of how you want to track it and work with the GC and the owners on these packages of change orders, requests, and on change orders. Now, I think I'll be going through what is in these change orders as well. So I'll go through some more definitions and then we'll kind of backtrack a little bit. So there's different categories that is associated with change orders. And the ones you kind of see here are the most common that you'll see most of the time. Schedule impact. If you're in a rainy area, there could be, rain delays. So that's an impact. Unforeseen conditions, you did the job walk and everything is going great and it's something that's not on the plans, especially if you're doing earthwork or anything and you out there digging, doing demo, and all of a sudden you come up, you hit a gas line or electrical lines or bones, anything, that's unforeseen conditions that, they should have identified when they were doing their discovery work by their engineering team. Another one is deleted scope, where, all of a sudden this project is like halfway through and it's like, okay, we're starting to run over budget mainly on design build. So they say, hey, can we scale back on some of the scope to bring the project back in budget? So, they're going to be like, okay, where's the nice to have? What do we really need to have? So that's where you just start to need to work with them on deleted scope. Your contract could have been for $70,000 and all of a sudden it got cut in half because like we don't need most of this. So it hurts because you were expecting that big contract and you're only going to get half. And things happen like that. Inspections, that is where the inspector comes out and something is not done to code, or the inspector's just not having a good day. I've seen this happen. And they're like, no, change this. This is not right. But you say, hey, this is what's on the plan. The plan check, yeah, but this is not right. You can't really fight with the inspectors, but if it's out of spec, especially if you're doing a tenant improvement and it's a very old building and you're going in there doing the TI, a lot of things are probably not up to current code. And that's when the inspector comes in, we'll start calling out all these code corrections there. Errors and omissions, that's another popular one. And with the design bid build, this is more on the design team, because if they put this whole project together and the owner has went through it, and when you bid the job, you got to bid it apples to apples. If something's missing, you're like, okay, I see this missing. Just keep notes that, hey, this could be a change order, if you get the job. So, you get the job and you start working, you say, hey, this isn't right. Something is missing here. You'll submit a request for information, RFI. They'll come back with a response and said, oh, please proceed with this. Okay, and then that was on them because the design team made an error or they omitted something by accident. And what's going to happen with these, the owner is going to go back to the design team to collect money to pay this change order. I'll stop. Let me get through this here. Site conditions, could change over time. From the time you walk to where you are now, things can change. The job was delayed months and months, and then all of a sudden you're remobilized. The site has changed. There could be all of a sudden you have some trees in the way, and conditions have changed there, or added scope. So those are some of the most common areas there. Is there any question before I get to the other side of these categories?
You're saying that even if a GC owner agrees that a change order is needed, but if they disagree with the cost, you've justified your time, they don't have to pay. And you've justified your time, they don't have to pay. Should we settle the cost of a change order before we proceed?
So let me see. Read that again for me one more time so I can make sure I understand it.
You're saying that even if a GC owner agrees that a change order is needed, but
Hmm.
if they disagree with the cost, you've justified your time, and you've justified your time, they don't have to pay. Should we settle the cost of a change order before we proceed?
Um, yeah, you should settle it and get it agreed upon. There could be, you need to go back and maybe adjust some of the numbers, with your time or your costs. Now, if you're in California, and it's public works, it's prevailing wages, they can't challenge the labor rates there. Now, if you're in North Carolina, somewhere where there's no prevailing wage, they might challenge your rates, your hourly rates. Like I said, with the hours to do it, they might challenge you on that, but, and that's where it could, or the cost of the material. And that's why if you have your supporting documents, then they should not be, challenging or disapproving of any of that. But it can happen. They're negotiating. They're trying to get the top dollar, the best dollar for the money. I mean, for what they're doing. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. Any other questions there?
No.
Okay. So continuing with some other of these categories, design change. That is, everything's been signed off and we're great. And all of a sudden it's like, no, I want this. Okay, well, Mr. Owner, then the architect's design team needs to go back and redesign it. So that is a category design change. They want to add something or they want to delete. We talked about the reduced scope. The other one is off hours. The job was saying, okay, you're going to bid this during normal business hours. Now you need to work off hours for your scope of work, but you didn't bid it as that off hours. As you know, that is a cost increase versus normal business hours. So you're going to be doing a change order for the differential of that labor rate when you have to switch from day to night or shift or whatever weekends, that's off hours. You didn't bid it that way. The other one that you can do is productivity, because that's more your efficiency of how you're going to be doing the work. You can say, hey, I'm going to be 85, 90% efficient on this job, because you get 8 hours in a shift, but you've got to do your 30-minute lunch, your breaks, so that's already down to 7 hours. Then you've got to, the travel distance to get materials, if you can't stage it right there. So your productivity and efficiency, is going to be there. So you know how long it's going to take. Now, if it starts to slow down your productivity because of other trades in your way, then you're like, hey, look, this is a time impact analysis. My productivity is not where it was when I bid this job. They can say, yeah, we agree with you that you're not doing 100 linear feet per hour, something like that. And you're only doing 70 because the justification of the electrical is in the way, HVAC is in your way, and all of a sudden, you're in there trying to do finishes, something like that. So the productivity there. Painting, because you want to be able to get painting done sooner than later, but something is holding you up. Phasing, the job could have been bid as one phase. Now they want to break it up into multiple phases. So that affects your mobile and demob, because you got to mobilize, do the work, demob, come back. So that is what phasing can change your costs, because everything you bid as what was in the invitation to bid. Code corrections, we kind of talked about that, goes back to inspections. Everything's out of code. Okay, we need to now do these electrical outlets at 18 inches. Some things are 16, 14, from the previous building. So, code corrections is that. Trade damage is that goes back to back charge. Another trade damaged your work after it was signed off by the architects. So, you can go into a change order, and that's where that back charge is going to go to that contractor that damaged your trade. And then acceleration. This is another one where you can get some money of, okay, we had bid this at 100 days. Oh, we need for you now to get it done in 80. Okay, that's 20 days sooner than what we talked about. So acceleration means you gotta have to probably get a second shift in there, or increase your crew size, work weekends or whatever it is. That's the acceleration to meet that 80 days instead of 100 days. So you want to be able to sit and talk to them about, hey, okay, you want to accelerate, but let's see how we can do this, because maybe it's impossible to do it 20 days less. You can say, hey, I can do it in 15, but you're still going to have to track that, and that's the reason for the change order, because it's a cost that you got to do with your team. Or if it's a material you was expecting to come in at a certain date and now you got to go back and say I need it earlier, they might say, okay, hey, excuse me, hey, that might cost you a little bit more for me to accelerate in my production in the factory. So those are quite a few ones that you can select from. Any questions? So at this point, have you guys done a lot of change orders? How do you guys handle your own change orders? Anybody want to volunteer before I call on someone? So no one has done change orders.
All right, so
Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead, sir. Yeah.
yeah, done change order for me. I have clients that are subcontractors. Some of them are prime subs, some of them are second tier subs.
Mm-hmm.
And with some of the smaller contractors, they screw up their change orders all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come back later on and say, well, I want to submit a change order. And then they dispute because they haven't done the paperwork. They have not done the paperwork. They haven't done the daily reports. They haven't done a lot of stuff and trying to backtrack. So
Mm-hmm.
I've always told them, and it is important, paperwork. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure you can justify. And in the most recent situation, they tried to get a change order that it was just messy. Let's just put it that way. It was just messy because there was an owner involved, there was a GC involved, and then there were a sub to the GC.
Mm-hmm.
But they were dealing directly with the owner without the GC around.
Ooh,
You
that's kind of messy.
that gets real messy real fast. And so I told them, I said, you need to have that GC around at all times. And you're not submitting, and then they even submitted a change order to, I think, to the owner. I'm like, you are a sub.
Right.
You submit your change order to the GC. So the one thing that stands out, acceleration is important. I need to get them on that. Design change, that's basic. If you change that, then that's easy. And then off hours, that's always a hard one too. That I've seen in this. But I think the most important thing I want to really talk about is the paperwork that needs to be done to justify whatever change order there is. And I was the one who submitted the question about the GC and owner agrees that a change order is needed. But they can come back and say, well, we don't want to pay that.
Yep, it can happen.
Really?
Yeah, and that's where the owner's like, I'm not going to pay this, but it needs to be done. And they can say, well, GC, why didn't you have this, in your scope? Or there could be a contingency that is set aside to cover some of these. So the GC might have some contingency for this project, and they were probably trying to go back to the owner for more. And it's like, no, I'm not going to pay for this. You already have a contingency built in your contract. So there was some reason why the owner would not pay it because of that. And then, there it can get tricky. Now, if it's design build, you should be able to carry a little bit of contingency in your own in case that happens where they said, no, okay, well, I got a little bit of money here. I can cover it. And then if it's,
never wants to get off of money though.
excuse me?
The GC never wants to give up any of their money.
Correct.
At
Exactly.
all. Even if it's their fault, they're going to try and make the subcontractor eat it if they can.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing that they also forget is that when you're doing a change order, you can't charge regular overhead and profit.
Mm-mm.
But a lot of people don't know that. There's a limit. You have to read the paperwork because it will
Mm-hmm.
tell you what your maximum is on change orders
Right.
for that.
Exactly. Yep. Like I said, it might be in your contract 15%, but if you're performing the work, you could probably do all of it. But if you're have someone working for you as a sub, as a second tier, you're gonna get 5%, and the person that's performing the work get 10%.
Right.
You're gonna have to know exactly how they want that 15%. You can't just go, I'm gonna mark it up 25, 30%. They're like, nope, and it's not gonna happen. And that's why you really gotta know what your general condition costs are, because that's where you can add on that 5% if you're a GC, or 15%, because your superintendent foreman is in the field. It's already out there 100% of the time. So you can't add, cost to that supervision. It's going to be more your admin, unless there is extension on the project. It's like, okay, now your superintendent foreman gets additional money there. But
Okay.
you really going to have to know your costs, and that's when you're putting your numbers together. It's like, what is my exact general conditions for each person? Your accountant, whoever's doing your engineering, whatever it is, know exactly what it is, because that is where your insurance, the bond is, public works, because, your bond premium is going to go up every time your contract goes up. Same thing with insurance. That premium goes up a percentage, maybe 2%, whatever it is. But you need to know what those costs are so you can apply that money evenly on those change orders.
I don't want to occupy. Someone else has a question in the queue.
No, this is good stuff. Anybody else?
Yes, there's Patricia had a situation. So this is her message. I have a situation. We have grade finish in our contract, but the other trades are in our way, and subs work needs to happen first. The general has other ideas he would like for us to perform partially. We have sent a punch list for them to clear the way because we cannot move in and out. So we've stated the general is impeding our progress, and we won't be back until we can finish the task. If the general has agreed to pay a change order for extra move, the reason is our schedules for the other clients won't allow us to just be on call. BTW, our scope has allowed for only a certain amount of our moves in coincidence with our work.
Mm-hmm. So reading that is, okay, you're doing your scope of work. You've got other people that's slowing you down to where you can't do anything. Now you need to leave the site, the project, until they're ready for you. The problem that you said you're having is because you have other jobs, you can't just come back in the next day or two. And that's what I'm hearing. So that's that, the phasing work. Okay, you're gonna demobilize, which you already had that in the first. So you want me to come back? Okay, the mobilization and the demo, but however, I need X amount of days to get my crew ready. So when you're writing that change order request, you need to say, I need X amount of days before I can remobilize. State exactly how many days you need, because you're coming off the job and you don't want your crew sitting around, because you can't pay them and you don't want to pay them to sit around. So you have that to be able to say, it's going to take me 5, 6 days to come back after you give me the go ahead. And that's where getting a schedule is very important, because when you start the job, that first schedule is going to be a benchmark. And then you should be getting a 3-week look ahead every week to see when do you really need to be on site. If this is like a 2-year job, you should be getting that schedule all the time. Be in these meetings, because something can happen, but you want to be able to be proactive instead of reacting to, you get that phone call, I need you out here in 2 days. Oh, wait a minute, I wasn't even ready. So getting that schedule kind of helps you with these change orders as well.
Mr. Lowry,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I say something about that?
Yeah.
Some contracts are written that if there is an extension in the contract and or a change order, that the subcontractor must be available. You've seen those contracts, and you got to have those. So you've got to read your contract thoroughly,
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they will demand, because if you aren't available within the timeline that the GC or owner says you're supposed to be, they can give it to someone else and give you and charge you back for that.
Mhm. You're right. Thank you for bringing that up. And that's where you negotiate before you sign and said, okay, you're saying this. Let me say, give me 3, 4 days, you know. So they might be able to change some of the wording to help you out there, but you're going to have to negotiate and read your contract before you sign it. Well, you should have read it when you're bidding the job so you can understand, okay, this is a red flag for me. This is going to be another one. The way that he was just talking about that, you can negotiate, hey, let's put some words in here to where we both can benefit.
I have a question. I just typed it here. Can I ask the question out now?
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah, but if we have to buy some specialty product that's only from exact the same factory, and they delay on the shipping of the product, would it entitle the contractor from owner requests for extension time and also compensated time extension?
So what I'm hearing is you getting a special product from the manufacturer
Exactly.
and they have said, okay, I can do this in 30 days. And then you go back to them and say, hey, I'm about ready for this. They said, oh, no, we're not ready. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Exactly, yeah.
They
They
need
did
more
it
time.
because of their own deliveries or whatever reason,
Hmm.
they delayed for 2 more months. And
Hmm.
so this delay impact the whole schedule and
Hmm.
making time for the subcontractor or contractor, you say. And so would it be compensated by owner? Is it
No.
compensatable?
First, what you need to do is tell your manufacturer, you agreed, we signed this purchase order. You're going to have to do whatever it takes in your powers, your production to meet this deadline. Because another thing that could happen with your scope, you could be on the critical path because you could push the end of this project because of that delay. Because you've had time at the beginning of this project to say, hey, this is how many days it's going to take. Once you give your time and it goes into that schedule becomes part of this contract. So they're going to hold you to it. And that's where the liquidated damages come in. You don't want to have those liquidated damages. Then you might say, okay, if you can't meet it, these liquidated damages, I'm going to charge it to you, Mr. Manufacturer, because you're causing me to be late. Is where you want to try to head it off early. You want to be in communication with those manufacturers, say, hey, are you on schedule? Anything's going to happen, is where that delay, you want to try to minimize those delays from your manufacturers. Or what you could do is when you put the schedule together, give yourself a little bit of a buffer. They say in 30 days, say, okay, 40 days or 35 days. Give yourself a little extra time if you can in that schedule when you're building at the beginning of the contract of the project. Um, Now, if the owner is going to accept it, I doubt it because you have agreed to a time. Now, if the owner makes a change and then you got to go back to your manufacturer, that's a different story. But if your manufacturer is causing a delay, the owner most time is not going to pick up that, fee. You're going to have to figure out how to make it happen because then you're going to affect everybody else.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And that's when you're doing these submittals and shop drawings at the very beginning. When you're doing that schedule, it's going to tell you in your contract how many days you have to put your submittals and shop drawings together to be submitted for approval. Then they have 5 days, whatever it is, it's going to say for them to review, to give those comments and approved shop drawn submittals back to you. So at that point is when the clock starts to tick with your suppliers, manufacturers. Once they get the approved submittals and shop drawings from you, that's when their time starts, not, before then, because they have not put it in production. So when you're doing your schedule, you got to account for you, A, putting together these shop drawing submittals, B, the review, C, if it comes back to you, you need to make corrections. That could be some more time in there, and then giving it to your manufacturers to put it in their production schedule.
Okay, thank you.
I know that was kind of a long-winded thing there. Any other comments, questions on that?
Yeah,
Charles said, go ahead, Charles.
I'll say this, communication is key to everything. It may not solve the issue, but it
Mhm.
gives you room for argument later. I had a
Mhm.
situation where we were doing a design build for this major building, and they were
Mhm.
ordering product from out of the country. What we didn't know, there were delays, nothing to do with us, but delays. What we didn't know is that when they changed a portion of the product or something was wrong with it, that wherever this product was coming from, I think it was coming from, I think Spain or wherever it was coming from, that they shut down production all of August. Nobody's in there all of August.
Mhm.
And so they could not open up this building without these products in, but it had nothing to do with us. So if there's any delay on the owner side or on the GC side, you have to document that too,
Mhm.
because they're going to come and try to charge you for it when it had nothing to do with us.
Yes, you're right, especially if any products coming from Europe. Summertime, you're right, 6 weeks they're shut down. So you have to remember that, because I remember when I was, over going to Germany validating equipment, and I went in summer, and they're like, "Hey, the factory's not open."
Right. Right.
What am I supposed to do? I need this equipment. The other thing is when it's coming, imports, it could be down there at the locked up down at the port, because they can't get it through customs. What do you do for that? And you're right, Charles, communication. You need to be in communication when anything that's international that's coming, any product that's coming from overseas or whatever it is, because it's out of your control. Once it's on that boat coming across the plane, it gets held up. What do you do? It's right now with all these tariffs and the economy, you guys need to be really aware of where these products are coming from. You'll see in a lot of this is they want the products made, in America and buy it in America. So, that kind of helps you control the delivery. But sometimes some of these products that they want is not made here in the United States. So this, time of construction is very iffy, even with Canada and, lumber and stuff. It's hard. It's really hard out here now, to be doing work, but you can do it. Anything else?
We're
Okay.
good.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So, the other we're talking about the owner, prime directions, notify, waiting for directions. Like I said, proceed under protest. Proceed, do not proceed. Those are some of the others. And okay, we're gonna get into the change order request form. How many people have their own change order request form or change order forms and logs?
We do.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right. So go ahead.
Carla in the chat said not yet.
Okay. So this template I'm going to give you, it's just a template suggestion. You can create your own. And what I also want to say, with any of the documents I have, most of the time they're Excel. They have formulas in there. So my disclaimer is, if you delete a cell or something, there's a formula in there and it messes up your numbers, not on me, but verify your numbers manually too. I just want to say, so change order request form, you know, here's a template, and I'm gonna go through a little bit about this, you know, the PCO, PCI number, you know, the prime, you know, could have one number that they're going to be putting together. Then you as a subcontractor or your subs could have their own PCO number. Then you're going to put your company name and the date of submission. So that's kind of the basics up there. Then the next is the reason for the change. You know, it could be real simple, unforeseen conditions, and you just want to write a little bit more. But here, the next section is like you're going to go really into detail. And the way I'm always telling people with change order requests, it's like you're going into court. You know, you're fighting for this money. So you want to make sure that this is an open and shut case on each change order, so they will not come back to you and say, hey, I don't have enough information. This is missing. I need this. So you want to give them everything that you can to make this a very quick turnaround. You know, like I said, you'll write up the detail of the scope of work while it's being changed. And then down here is I have it set up so, you know, the tax on labor, if it's 0, you know, you can change it to 10%. I just put 0 for right now, and it will change. And tax on materials, you should know that overhead and profit, you know, like in this example, it should be like 10%, because the example I showed you was 15. So, you know, you're doing on yours as a general, whoever doing the work is 10%. Your tiers, oh, I got it backwards here. And this is if you got subcontractors. And you know, you can play around with the sheet as you need. You know, if there's a bond, you know, you can add that in there, you know, 3%, whatever the premium is. So you kind of set that up, and then you're going to go down into this section here, and you know, you're going to say electrical temp power. You know, that's what the material is. You know, it could be the generator, the quantity, and then whatever the cost could be, and it'll give you that here. Then you want to go into the next one is your labor for, you know, setting up that temp power. You know, it's going to take 4 hours to do it at $75 an hour, and it will give you the 300. So this is kind of laying it out so that they can see where your cost is coming from to make it a lot easier for you to get approved. You know, and then you can just do it again for your second tier, you know, line item number 2, you know, it could be conduit. I'm just gonna, and you know, I can do a lump sum, or you can put whatever it could be, you know, and then it'll do there. And then it just continues down. And then what will happen, it will roll back up into, you know, here is my total change order. And that's how you'll get this number here. Yeah, there was some formulas that I took out because with this one was more for someone that's performing all the work themselves. But you can add in some cells, formulas. Actually, I'll fix this before I resend it out. So this is kind of like your cover sheet that you're going to be submitting. And I put some notes over here so you can follow through what you need to do. Like I said, this is just your cover sheet. From here, you want your supporting documents to go with it. You know, like I said, if there was a RFI that you sent, you're going to put that in there. The RFI response telling you to do this, got to go in there. If there's equipment, you want to be able to show, hey, this is where the cost is. Now, if it's a guaranteed maximum price GMP contract, you're really going to have to show everything. So why not show it during the change order so that they have it? You know, if it's lump sum, you know, they might ask for your unit costs, you know, at the very beginning of the project, so they can kind of have a number of what they think it's going to be. You know, it's up to you, but having those supporting documents is very important that you're going to submit with that. So once you have all that together, then you're gonna just create a PDF packet and then submit it over to whoever reviews and approve contracts. So, it's a simple, there I have some that's more complex, but this is kind of more of a user-friendly one where it just works a lot easier. And then from there, you want to start tracking this on a change order request log. So this is another example I have of one where, it's filled out, but it kind of walks you through everything that we were talking about previously. Now is being applied to this change order log.
Robert,
So,
if I can interrupt you,
yeah,
Charles was asking, where do we account for tariffs? I assume it's in the other category.
tariffs. Oof. Yeah, it'd be other on that sheet. Yes, just put tariffs down there because 200%, whatever, the president is doing now. But yeah, that's where you just put it on the other. What I need to do is, thank you, Charles, for that. I want to fix this one and resend it so that way can kind of have a notification. Hey, be aware of tariffs. What am I going to do with the tariff? Which is pretty much taxes anyway. So we can kind of change it to tax, tariff, whatever we do. So I'll change that, but definitely get this out to you guys again. Thank you for that.
Also asked,
Go
sorry,
ahead.
also asked, where do we include workers' comp insurance? Should that be included in the hourly rate?
No, let me go back to that. So your workers' comp is going to be in this 5% or 10%, whatever it is where your insurance is going to be covered. You have your liability auto workers' comp is going to be in your overhead. And that's going to be with that line item. When you did your general conditions, you'll know what it is, but it should fall within that percent of 10%, 15%, or whatever it is in your contract. The reason why I have the bond here, because, with public works, there's a bond premium and you want to be able to track that. But that's where your insurance goes in your overhead.
Thank you. That was all.
Yeah, and then your profit is included in that because you only get a percentage. So, each time you do a change order, you're not going to get a lot of profit off of it, but you're going to get some. So that's why you got to make sure that you have your general conditions, insurance, and all that identified so you can apply that percentage to those line items. Okay, so getting back to here. So well, we got about 20 minutes left here. Okay, you guys got to keep me on time check here.
You have 30 minutes.
Okay, well, we'll stop a little before so we can have some more question and answers and your survey and everything. So, with this, it can be a blank. You can just clear it out or just have this and refer back to it. So remember, we're talking about the PCI, potential cost impact number. This is your number that you want to track on your own system here, your management system. The description, so like this first one, the reason why I had it 003, because in my own system, when I was doing this 001, 002 was something that I identified, but I found that I don't need to do that. I'm not going to submit a change order. So that's why my PCI number starts at 03. It could skip, as you can see, around, it's just how you track. So your description is HVAC second floor schedule acceleration. You did the work and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, we got to accelerate the schedule for HVAC on the second floor of this multi-building because we need to hurry up and turn over the second floor because that's the IT closet. There's sometimes they need early turnovers and they didn't identify in advance. Now it's like, oh, we got an early turnover. Let's accelerate the schedule for HVAC. And then you're going to put in, the reason why, details, subscription why. So it kind of tells a story. You want your change order request to tell a story without you being there. And that's where people get in trouble. You don't tell a story and they don't know how to review it. because you're not sitting there. You could have change order meetings where you can go in with this log and say, okay, you know what, I've got all these open, pending, let's go through that. Then they would say, okay, let's have a meeting to talk through some of these change orders. Then you can just put in the type of change to owner, and the is approved. I think on this one, yeah, this was something at the end of the project, but the status could be pending, denied, and all those statuses that I was showing you previously, you'll keep track here. And I have filters, so that's why I can do filters on certain ones too, because once it's approved, you kind of want to focus on what's submitted proceeding, because these are risks right now. Everything else has been approved. So when you have your change order meetings, it's like, hey, I submitted this, I'm proceeding, but hey, this is a risk exposure to you. You want to be able to get it done. Like I said, that's where you've got all this description here to tell what it is. So the status is submitted proceeding. The date that you created your PCI number 77 is on October 26th. The date that you submitted. The reason why you want to do this is where the clock starts to tick with the owner or the GC, the date that you submit, because within your contract, they might have 5 days to turn around. If there is you're past that, and it's like, hey, you know what, you're delaying this project because I need this change order. They can say, okay, go ahead and proceed in an email while they're still doing a formal one. And then the amount. And this is where we were talking about the owner change order number, how in this instance, it was 1-for-1 because they didn't want to group them because they want to be able to review each one with their cost manager. And that's why you have the change order number, was the same one. And the category, unforeseen condition. Now, what you can do here is put in how many days that this change is going to impact you. You could put 10 days in there because you can sometimes get that additional 10 days on your schedule as well because it's impacting your schedule. Put it in there. Let them know that each change is impacting your schedule because you were not anticipating change orders. Now you got change orders. Okay, I need additional days to do these change orders. And they say, yeah, I agree with additional 10 days to do this change order. They'll approve it. Or, then you want to be able to put the date approved and then the owner directions proceeding. As we're saying, that they can do that. So this is kind of how you're going to fill out your change order log. It's a lot of information on there, but it's helpful to have it. So when you're negotiating change orders, you have it on this log so you're not going through your paperwork. Oh, wait a minute, because you want to be able to get in there, hit the points, get it approved, go to the next. Like I said, when you do have these meetings, yeah, everything's been approved. That's great. But you want to talk about the ones that's not approved yet. You want to get that. And the key things with all these change orders, you want to get them approved or whatever it is before you walk off the job. Because as soon as you walk off the job, you have lost your leverage to get anything approved. And that's where they're going to come back, oh, denied, or I'm only going to give you 50% of what's there. So getting change orders approved while you're still on the job is very important. And also you want to be able to bill for that. The longer these stay open, you can't invoice them for that. So get them. I like to reconcile once a month if you're there several months or whatever it is. Reconcile, get them approved, push them through, get it approved, get the signature on these change orders, so you can then put it into your added, to your contract value, because that's going to increase, so you can bill for it. Any questions so far? Everybody's kind of follow me on that. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to approve. So also at the bottom of this change order, you're gonna see what your change order amount. So it's $440,000 in change orders. And that can be added to your original contract value. So it's great to be able to keep track of these change orders, because when you having financial meetings with the owner or your own, if you are with your own company, if there's a CFO or someone, you want to be able to talk about, hey, where am I with this project? What are my risks out there? I've got these projects, these change orders that are not approved yet. That's a risk. Okay, how are you going to address that? So it's a great working tool here. I mean, but this is not how you have to do it, but if you want to, you can use it. And you can say it keeps the days impact as well. Any questions? Is this something that you guys think is beneficial for you? Okay, well, I'm gonna ask a question here, and you guys can put your answer in the chat here. So what is not included in the change order packet? A, the summary of change in scope. B, timeline, time impact analysis. RFI, request for information. D, certified payroll. Supporting documents of costs. That's E. F is PCI. G is all the above. So what is not included in your change order packet? I give you guys about 10, 15 seconds to drop your answer in the chat. I'll read them again. A is summary of change in scope. B is timeline, time impact analysis. C is RFI. D is certified payroll. E, supporting documents of costs. F, PCIs. G, all the above.
Robert, if you repeat it one more time, I can have it as a poll.
Okay, so what is not included in a change order packet? A is summary of change in scope. B is timeline, time impact analysis. C is RFI. Am I going too fast?
Mhm.
D is certified payroll. E is supporting documents of costs. F is PCIs. G is all the above. Thank you, Rena, for creating a poll question.
Nice. Give me 1 second, I'll make it live.
Yeah, that's why I like in person when I throw out questions like this.
The last choice was GCIs, correct?
F
F
was
and
PCI, G was all the above.
PCI.
Okay.
I'm gonna make it live in 2 seconds. It's just loading
Okay.
for a second. Everyone, you should see a poll on your screens. Please respond. We've given you some extra time, so I'm gonna give everybody a couple more seconds and then I'm gonna close it. We have 40% who participated. Let's make sure. I'll give everyone 10 more seconds.
Yeah, this
Last
is a
call.
test question right here.
All right. You should see the results on your screen.
Right. Yeah, you're
Are you
right.
able to see?
Yes, I am. So D, certified payroll is not included because your certified payroll for the ones that do prevailing wage, that is your certified payroll is what's going to Department of Industrial Relations, or if you're in a union or, those, your payroll doesn't have to be included. That's what you're paying your guys. So right, certified payroll is not included, but everything else is. And that's what creates your packet. All right, thank you for that. So we just answered what is included. And here's RFIs. So you'll get this PowerPoint, so you'll see all this and PCIs, correct. So the three common mechanisms for affecting construction project changes is contractor claims, change in directives, and change orders. Those are the three most common mechanisms. So, all right, and a little bit about contractor claims, when there's no time to go through the process, and then there's a directive coming from the engineers or the architect of records.
There's a question in the chat. Why include RFIs?
Why do include RFI, request for information? Because it's giving you a directive of what to do. And if it's telling you, the response comes back and said, no, do X instead of what was originally. So that's why you want to include it. That's a supporting document of why you're doing this change. And that's a clear record that they're telling you to do it. That's why you want the RFI included. Okay, so there is a little bit of definitions about contractor claims. And, here's the change directives, when time and cost of the work of the contractor is directed to perform, it has not been agreed upon. So that's where you hasn't been agreed upon, but you got to get it done and figure it out later. And that's very risky when you get these directives. That's that way. Formal change orders, that's what we've been going through, a formal written agreement between the contractor, project owner, or prime architects to amend the terms of the contract. So that's a formal change order. The others is informal, but it still kind of ties back to being formal because you want to get them formalized. So we're winding down here to make sure that we are ending on time here. So the summaries of change order management, change order tells a story. I've been saying that throughout this whole presentation, it tells a story. Especially if you're on design build and it goes to litigation, all that. If it goes to court, you have to be able to tell a story. Because then, if you're part of that design build and all of a sudden this thing's gone legally, you got to be able to tell the story so that way you're still protected and hopefully you'll still get paid once, it is, complete, reconciled open change orders monthly with owner or prime so that minimize your risk exposure of not getting paid or not getting approved on change orders, or they come back and want to negotiate. You want to get them done sooner so they really can't come back to negotiate. And then also understand your financial impacts with these change orders. It's like, how does it affect your cash flow? Can you make your payroll? Because now you've got these change orders, but you're doing the work, but you got payroll on Thursday. Can you float that? That's what you have to be able to be business oriented when it comes to that. The billing, you bill once a month, make sure you get as many of those on there. If the billing is a net 45, we know it's going to take longer than 45 days to get billed. You want to say, hey, can you do an early pay or something, which could be a percentage. There's times where if you're under billing, that's going to hurt your cash flow. Overbilling can happen if they tell you, especially if it gets to fourth quarter and they want to get this money spent. So that way next year the owner can get money, because sometimes if money's left over, they get less money the upcoming year. So they might say, "I want you to overbill, load it up front." That's great, but be aware that you have that money and don't spend it elsewhere. Um, have a contingency plan when you need to negotiating change orders. It's like, do you have contingency to cover it? And did these change orders already have a little bit buffer in there? Most of the time, yes. Especially when it comes to your man hours, you probably, put an extra padded that a little bit, just to cover anything, because that's how you make money. That's how you make profit, is when you can pad some of these change orders and it's just not a direct cost to do it. So that kind of enhances your fee or your profit. But I still will keep that in the contingency plan until the job is totally done, because you might have to go in there and use that for something, that a scope that you miss. So, be able to negotiate. Like I said, if it's the labor cost, is union, it is what it is. They can't really mess with that. Cost of the material, they might be able to in your hours, and then your admin costs, which is not union or whatever it is, they might challenge some of that. But, you have to be able to fight for your rights here of, hey, this is what it is. I can't do anything less than this. And then if there's one thing, they might make 15, 20 change orders they want to negotiate. You might have to give and take on some. It's like, okay, I'll give you this, but I want this. That's negotiating. So you win at the end when you've got 10, 15 change orders requests to review to negotiate. You should come out on top. And finally, is documentation, documentation, documentation. Like Charles said, you've got to have the documentation. This is done daily. Your daily reports, detailed as much as possible as what happened. If you did create a potential cost impact on that date, all that's got to be documented to help you with these, change orders and stuff. So we have come to the end. So now it's kind of open the floor for questions, comments, or something I didn't cover that you want to ask me. This is the time to do it before I turn it over to Rena and Connor.
I got a question.
Yes,
So,
sir.
real situation where subcontractor had to send someone to the pier, to wherever, to get this product.
Mm-hmm.
And the only person available that could go was a senior PM. It was a layman's job, but only a senior PM could do it. Do they have to pay that senior PM hourly wage?
Yeah, because they're physically doing labor.
Okay.
Because they wouldn't have to go get it. Maybe sometimes the senior like, hey, you know what, I'm not going to eat it. But I would say, hey, because of this, you could do it that way. But it's sketchy when it's a professional person going out picking up deliveries. Just have to be careful on the documentation with that.
All right. That's my only question I have right now. This is a good class. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And that's a good question. Is like, if you have a trucking company that's supposed to be your delivery, right? And they're not there to deliver, who's gonna go pick it up? Then what you can do, Charles, is like deduct it from your delivery company instead of going back to the owner. Because if you had contracted a trucking company and they couldn't do it, that's a back charge.
Yeah, but this included tariffs. That's the
Yeah.
problem.
Oh,
They had to go pick up something coming internationally, and it wasn't a big thing, but didn't realize that the tariffs were going to affect it the way it did. So
yeah.
he had to sign off, pay for it, blah, 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 whatever it was.
Got it. So the tariffs caused this. Man, yeah, put your time in there. I mean, that they have to pay for it. They have to go down there. That's time associated because of that tariff. Because that's going to be new. So I can tell you most time you're not going to see in your contracts tariffs, how to handle tariffs. So that could be a question when you start these projects. Hey, how do we handle these tariffs? We don't know what they are. Same thing when we had the pandemic with
Mm,
COVID. Remember, no one's prepared for that.
right.
And now we're not prepared for tariffs. How do we be proactive, get in front of the curve for tariffs? Have that discussion with whoever it is that hired you. That's a good question. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else? All right. Well, I mean, here is my contact information here. So, feel free to reach out to me afterwards if you have any follow-up questions. Hopefully that this is very informative and you learn at least one or two things from this. But, so this, I think, is a very important topic that a lot of times is not discussed or taught. People think, oh, you should know how to do this. Now, there's many, many ways to do this, but you want to be effective and, make sure that you're making the money and getting approved here. So with that, thank you all. I'm going to turn it back over to Rena and Connor.
Okay, everyone, can you guys see my screen? Thank you, Robert, for taking time this afternoon to come and speak about change orders. We appreciate your presentation. I want to thank everyone here for making the time out of their afternoons to join us. We appreciate you coming. If you look in the chat and on the screen in front of you, you'll see the QR code for the survey. The survey provides us invaluable feedback about our trainings and events. A lot of the information that we receive from the survey guides us when we're planning our training calendar and things like that. So